Welcome to Books on Air, the podcast that tells the story behind the book. It includes insights from authors about how they compose their work, what inspires them, and what they hope you'll take away from their book. Here's your host for this episode of Books on Air, Suzanne Harris.
Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Sloan Fremont, filling in for Suzanne Harris. This is a podcast where listeners get the secret story behind every book. Joining me today is Dr. Elizabeth Grubbs, author of the book, Grip Life. This book not only raises the reader's awareness of the 7 elements of health, but provides them with suggestions for improving their health and a method of evaluation of their progress. They can use their evaluation to improve their 2 weakest elements. So, Elizabeth, I want to welcome you to the Books on Air podcast.
Thank you.
So let's start out by telling the audience just a little bit about yourself and what led you to write your book, Grip Life.
Well, I'm a Southern girl. I went to Southern schools. I've gone to some Northern schools. I've gone to school out of the United States just to see what those universities was like, of that particular one. And in the meantime, I wrote Grip Life while I camped out in my home during COVID time. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, what is it on my bucket list that I can do? Mm-hmm. And writing a book had been on my bucket list for 10 years. I said, okay, well, I won't do too much interaction with others. So this will be a good quiet time for me to write. Then the next question in my mind was, well, what do I write about?
Right.
And I said, well, it needs to be something that could reach all humanity, mm-hmm. Maintaining or improving something, because I think the biggest room in the world is room for improvement. Yeah. And therefore, I thought about health, and I began to write about health mm-hmm. and life, because everybody has a life. So I said, well, this might be something that all humanity can use.
Right. Right. And so in your book, you talk about 7 elements of health. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yes. One is physical health, which is body wellness. A lot of people are really about physical health. Mm-hmm. And I like physical health. And sometimes you have to do it according to your age or whatever. But I can say physical health can be movement for just about any age, because mm-hmm. you can do low-level exercises if you're over 65 or 70 or what have you. And it's a good thing. Physical health could certainly relieve stress or whatever. And it has to do with body wellness. Some people use physical health to maintain their weight, mm-hmm. so to speak. Mental health, I think, is one of the most important ones, because it's mind wellness. Mm-hmm. If you don't have your mind, you do not know what you're doing physically, mentally,
right?
And you may not be able to succeed vocationally, because it will influence your employment rating. Besides that, you have financial health, and certainly mental health could influence your financial health, right? Because you especially if you're getting that money through a salary or from a job, or if you need to master your budget. Besides that, you have social health, and you may not be in the big society, because you might be in a mental facility if you cannot get along with group participation. That could also influence your work job. Mm-hmm. Spiritual health, I wrote that because I grew up in a Southern family, that valued family. valued God and certainly valued education. So, and personally, I said, well, let me check a few Bible verses and see if they relate to each of these elements of health.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out I did locate some that did, and I use those because I certainly believe in Christian living. And I thought, well, if everybody would live just by the 10 Commandments, this might be a better world.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? So you wrote about these elements of health, and you've mentioned some of them: physical, mental, financial, social, and spiritual. So tell us how these elements of life influence each other.
Well, as I said, one can influence the other. And I gave some examples of mental health now, because I'm big about mental health, because I had a teenage experience with a lady that lived in the community who had been in and out of the insane asylum.
Mm.
And sometimes she didn't take her medicine. And that particular day when she visited my grandmother, she had not had her medicine. And physically, she did not look right. Body-wise,
Mm-hmm.
her shoes didn't even match.
Oh,
And
wow.
she didn't have on clean clothes, so that was a physical thing. As far as her family was concerned, she did have some distant relatives, but the ones she had that lived in town could not just take care of her every day because they were working for their own families.
Mm-hmm.
Vocational help. If you are somewhat irritable at work, or you have a lot of stress, or you take your stress out on others, that could certainly influence your job.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would probably, you may not, or if you're depressed or have anxiety or some other mental factor, you may not be able to concentrate on your employment skill or exercise what you could do with your marketable skills.
Mm-hmm.
Might not be able to concentrate. Now, mental health will also influence your financial health because of you may not be able to make out your budget. You may not even be able to keep your checkbook balance or whatever. Also, financially, if your mental health isn't good with the company, and that is sensed by you getting in trouble with the boss or getting in trouble with other workers,
Mm-hmm.
then you may have write-ups on your evaluation, and you may even be asked for mental evaluation, have to take a test or something. Social health. People seem to shun people who have been in mental institutions or who've had some mental illnesses in their family. Now, that's just my interpretation of society. That's the way that has gone from my observation. But socially, they may not invite you to the sorority or to various different organizations or the different type of socials. Whereas if that group felt that you had something to offer to the group, would invite you also to become a member. And spiritual health, different people believe in different things. I really don't try to push my belief on anybody,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say spiritually, I call it knee-mail when I pray, and I believe in a higher power.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes if you give that stress talking to somebody who's not going to tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you close up in a room all by yourself and talk to God. That has helped me. I don't know whether it's helped anybody else, but I do believe in doing that. So that's how I think these different elements can influence each other. Plus,
yeah, and they definitely are not independent, right? With one, if one element of health is out of balance, then it has a kind of a domino effect, I guess you'd say, because it affects really everything in your life, right?
Yes. And so, the one thing I need to say about that I thought in my own mind is not only do each element influence another element, each element, okay, I'm a person, but I came from a family, a mom and a dad. Okay. What went on in that household, and I'm happy to say was wholesome as I grew up and I look back, because what goes on in household A doesn't go on in household B. So that person, the head of the family, would influence the other people in the family, and then those people would live that way from their influence and teaching and influence the community. And a community, communities can impact states, states impact nations, and the nations impact the world. So it has a rolling impact.
Yeah, it does. That ripple effect of think that, it's easy to think our behavior is, inconsequential or doesn't really matter, but you're right. It does have that domino, that cascading effect into the rest of the world. And so what would you say to listeners maybe who've tried to take control of their own health in one of these areas, but maybe they've struggled? What advice would you give to them to motivate them or help them maybe look at it a little bit differently?
Well, number one, I would say think about it, write down the pros and cons, write down what you think you did wrong first. And then you go to that particular type of profession. Now, most times, a medical doctor could probably make referrals to the person. And then if you didn't want to do that and you weren't sure before you went to a medical professional, go on your computer. You can take mental health tests. It can tell you what you need to do physically. You could just about find any kind of information on the computer if you research it and just keep putting in words until you hit on what you want. You can take tests for depression. You can take tests for anxiety. As you see, I'm really big on that mental health because I came out of a counseling background. And relationship. I came out of a supervising background. But you do need to get along with others because a person became human from associating with other human beings.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And so what do you want people to know about taking control of their own health, of any of these elements of health? What would you like people to know about that?
Well, it's important to know that one influences the other, or may influence all the others. The other thing is check your health periodically. Take your physical. Look at yourself mentally. Look at your job. Now, what else can I do for advancement? If you're not the top person, then I would think you would have room for advancement. The biggest room in the world is room for improvement. And each person can improve something in his or her life. So you can look at that and set goals for how you might want to improve that.
Yeah, no, I love that phrase. You're saying the biggest room is the room for improvement. I totally agree with that. I think that's a really good reminder. So let's go back to your book for just a minute. What would you say sets your book apart from other books?
Well, a lot of books concentrate on one area. My book concentrates on life. It is something that every breathing human being witnesses from day to day. Right. Everybody has a past, and some of that past you may not can do anything about, but some of the past you may can get some help to overcome. And then you have a present. So you need to look at what you're doing in these different degrees of elements. And then you need to look to a future if you're looking for a quality life, a more quality life. Because what you do as a person may influence communities for generations to come. Yeah. And I'm saying that because I love sweets when I was growing up, and I do now. But I know not to pack ice cream in my freezer or make cakes or whatever, because my grandmother preached that. And I noticed that. I said, yeah, too many sweets not good for you. You know, I may eat one a week, but now I have to have some type of self-control. You have to practice self-control. And I think the elderly lady was very wise and knew what she was talking about, and she would walk every day and all of that. Now she lived to be 100 years old, and her sister lived to be 107. Wow. Ungrammatically speaking, I'm thinking, well, I ain't gonna get there, but I do want to live as long as I can.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, everything we've been talking about today, this reminder of the 7 elements of health, all of these parts of our life, I kind of think of them as like a Venn diagram, right? They overlap on each other. And when one is out of balance, it throws out everything else. And being able to understand that, to look at it maybe in that way too, because I think sometimes it's easy to, think that, that one thing in your life doesn't necessarily interrelate with the other things. But as we've talked about today, that isn't actually true. There is this bigger picture, and we're all part of it. Like you said, and the things that we do, which may seem small or insignificant, actually do ripple out into the world. And so it's important to take care of what we can take care of in our space, what we have control of. And I think your book is just an excellent reminder of that. So Dr. Elizabeth Grubbs, I want to thank you for joining us and being our guest today.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Well, good. I'm glad. We enjoyed having you. So again, my guest today has been Dr. Elizabeth Grubbs, author of the book, Grip Life. And you can find more about her book on Amazon, and I'll link to that in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Sloan Fremont, and I hope you'll join us for the next Books on Air podcast. Remember, you never know who's going to be here, and you never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for listening.